George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The slide to a banana republic continues helter-skelter in America. They have turned America the Beautiful into the biggest horror show on earth. And the blood of Donald Trump's ear counts for a hell of a lot more than the blood of the Palestinian children massacred again in Gaza this week. Camp after camp, massacre after massacre. And not one, but two of the British general election results head for the courts and are in the hands of the police, and one of them is mine. I promise you, this is going to be the mother of all talk shows. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
It is not yet clear who shot Donald Trump, why, and what's the wherefore, but some things are already eerily, uncannily familiar to those of us who lived through the murder, the nightmare on Elm Street in 1963, the murder of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, the murder of Malcolm X, the murder of Senator Robert F. Kennedy on his way to the White House in 1968. One thing is for sure, I predicted it all on here. In fact, I predicted it on the Red Pill, a new program out of Beirut just 2 days before it happened. If they cannot stop Donald Trump any other way, they will stop him with extreme prejudice, and they very nearly did so. Was the killer really 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, or was he just a patsy? We'll never know, because the Secret Service blew his brains out, but only after he had managed to wing the former president, future president of the United States of America in the ear. We'll never know if it really was Thomas Crooks of English and Scottish parentage, whose family identify as Jewish. That's all we know about him. 20 years old, really? And he managed to get onto a roof 120 yards from the President of the United States in waiting and loose off 3 shots, one of them getting so close as to draw blood. Was he really a sole gunman? Ever heard that before? Was he a patsy? Ever heard that before? And who killed him? And why did they wait so long? The audience were screaming at the police and the Secret Service that there was a man on the roof with a rifle. That was, in a way, a clue of what was about to happen. And who were these midget, dwarf Secret Service operatives? 30% of the women to fulfill the political correctness quotient, who seemed utterly out of their depth in the aftermath. Trump handled it all magnificently, of course, and surely guaranteed his victory in November. In fact, rendering otiose our poll this evening about George Clooney's article in the New York Times calling on Joe Biden to step down. A week's a long time in politics when it comes to writing polls. The truth is, They will not now remove Joe Biden because nobody else wants the job of going down to a landslide defeat like the one scored by Ronald Reagan in the aftermath of his assassination attempt when only one state in the Union voted for his opponent, whose name is now long forgotten, even by me. Nobody wants to be the man that gets trounced, gets swept away in a tsunami of red, as that's going to happen in November, as sure as eggs is eggs. So, Joe, at least you are secure, as long as you don't come to any accidents either. The incident, as it was described in the CNN, the fall, as it was described in other mainstream media outlets, the noises, loud bangs, all the other euphemisms that took place in Pennsylvania were all a cover for the fact that the deep state was at least complicit in the attempt to stop Joe Biden, and not just the deep state. When Joe Biden said, as he has said repeatedly, that Donald Trump has to be put into the bullseye, when they described all of them, Obama, Biden, Pelosi said, this is no ordinary election. This man has to be stopped. He must be stopped. They were all dog whistling for a 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, if indeed it was he. They were all crying out for a gunman to step forward. And as is now being speculated, the Secret Service, in fact, did see this gunman on the roof, but they did not open fire on him before he had opened fire at Donald Trump. When Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, the sundry commentators of the so-called mainstream media built Trump up into Hitler, they were crying out for someone to stop Hitler before he managed to get himself re-elected back into power, only to build concentration camps for them, only to weaponize law enforcement against them, only to clear out the CIA, the FBI, the other three-letter agencies that are guilty of such high crimes and misdemeanors ever since Donald Trump was elected in 2016. The Russiagate hoax, which paralyzed America for year after year, all built on nothing. An attempt to suggest that Trump was the Manchurian candidate, that the Russians had compromat on him, and that he could not be trusted with the stewardship of the Republic. These high crimes and misdemeanors are now 8 years on, and they have never stopped. The weaponizing of the words of hookers, sorry, Piers Morgan, adult entertainers, the ridiculous kangaroo courts erected throughout the land on mortgage issues to try and criminalize Donald Trump, put him behind bars, the better to disadvantage his re-election prospects. All of this led to that. All of the foregoing led to the blood on the stage in Pennsylvania yesterday. If Trump was really Hitler, why wouldn't you stop him? If Trump was really Hitler, why would you be praying for him today in the Situation Room in the White House? If Trump was really Hitler, why would you be praying for his health today? Why would you be expressing your solidarity with Hitler today? If somebody could have taken out Hitler, then they would have become the biggest hero in world history. But the facts are, Donald Trump is not Hitler. Donald Trump did not clear out the swamp. He didn't drain the swamp. He appointed its worst reptiles right all around him in the White House in his first administration. Donald Trump didn't stop the wars. He continued the wars. He rained down cruise missiles on Syria. He murdered General Soleimani and his friends in the airport at Baghdad didn't bat an eyelid when Barack Obama says today that political violence can never be acceptable. America's built on political violence. It deals out political violence, assassination, murder, mayhem, subversion, civil war, color revolutions. That's what America is made of. What do you mean, Barack, that political violence can never be accepted? You murdered American citizens with cruise missiles, with American passports in their pockets in Yemen and elsewhere. Political violence is endemic in the United States of America, and all kinds of violence turn it into the horror show that it is. As always, I reserve the greater part of my ire for the pygmies that rule the European democracies, who have tied our destiny to a horror show, to a helter-skelter towards civil war and perhaps oblivion. You have tied our fortunes, our futures, even our lives to Joe Biden and Donald Trump. You sophisticates, former bank officials, former professors, graduates of the world's best universities, you idiots, you educated idiots, have ruined Europe, tied our economy, and tied our very existence to a United States now spiraling out of control. If that bullet had hit not the ear of Donald Trump, but the back of the head of Donald Trump, there would now be a raging civil war in the United States. And you want us to lead them, to be led by them over the cliff into World War III? Are you maniacs, or is it you that's compromised? Is there compromise on you? Because it is difficult for sentient beings in Western countries to work out why you would tie us with a chain, a ball and chain, to the fortunes of a country rapidly becoming a banana republic without the bananas. Well, by the grace of God, by the turn of a head, by a stroke of luck, literally a whisker, that bullet did not hit the back of the head of Donald Trump. In any case, some new messiah figure from the right would have quickly emerged. Donald Trump Jr. would have romped to power. Melania, if she'd been born in the United States. Trump's daughter, any one of his family. Barron, a schoolboy, would have swept to power in November, because America is in the grip of a messianic need for a leader of a cult. That's what it's in the grip of. And who's to blame for it? Well, it's the same group of people that are to blame for the rise and rise of Marine Le Pen, for the rise and rise of Geert Wilders, for the rise and rise of the AFD, for the rise and rise of Nigel Farage. It's the same people, the centrists, who have so ruined all of our countries, our economies, our culture, our societies, that people are casting around, looking for a messianic figure to turn to that will put America first, put France first, put Britain first, put Germany first, make Germany great again. What? Make France great again, and so on and so forth. It is the utter, dismal, unutterably obvious failure of centrism that has bankrupted our countries, not only economically, though it has done exactly that, but bankrupted our sense of ourselves. These globalists in the grip of the WEF, Klaus, whatever his name is, George Soros, and all these Bill Gates, and all these other plutocrats seeking to craft a future for our people in which country does not matter, faith does not matter, family does not matter. The things that actually do matter are the things that they have sought to excise. We are in a big mess. Compare and contrast, if you will. Cast your mind back to my conversation with Piers Morgan when he could not fathom that I could trust Vladimir Putin more than I could trust any of these Western so-called leaders. Look at society in Russia. Look at the cohesion. Look at the national unity. Look at the bustling economy. Look at the bright future of the Russian people, of the Chinese people. Look at the social cohesion. Are they murdering their leaders? Are they murdering each other in vast number? Are they losing their religion? Are they losing their patriotism? Are they losing their culture? It is us that is losing or has already lost all of that. Now, America has nothing to do with me. What happens in it is entirely the property of the people of America, but God gave them such a country. Well, they stole it actually, but God created the greatest country on earth. Beneficent, bountiful, beautiful beyond compare, from sea to shining sea, from the redwoods to the Gulf. What a place. I've traveled the length and breadth of it. I've given speeches all over it. In my veins runs the blood of my great-grandmother who emigrated from the United States, from New York City to Scotland, getting on the wrong boat, most probably. I care about America, though it is not my business. What is my business is that my government and the government before it and the governments before that and the European governments nearest to me have sold everything to a dysfunctional country that could even yet ignite in civil war, just like 1861, could ignite into mass murder amongst themselves. I want to feel sorry if that happens. I don't want to be dragged down into the vortex with them, should it do so. Now, not one, but two British election results are now in the hands of the police. I'll be speaking tomorrow night in Rochdale at 7 p.m. in the Castlemere Centre in Rochdale. I'll be launching the fight back. And that fight back will take many forms. It will take several forms, some of them judicial. We have submitted to the Greater Manchester Police a file alleging electoral fraud in the narrow victory of the Labour candidate Paul Hu against me on the 4th of July in the British general election. I can't go into details now for obvious reasons, but the police are investigating the matter as is their duty, the allegations therein as is their duty, and I'm sure they will do so without fear or favour. Just as they will, I presume, in the complaint by the Labour grandee, John Ashworth, who has submitted his own file of complaints about his defeat in the general election on the 4th of July. Mr. Ashworth, a big friend of Israel, a key figure in the Keir Starmer firmament, can make his own allegations and will have to stand by them, stand over them, as indeed I will myself. but the way in which the Starmer Labour leadership has treated the fact that in huge swathes of the formerly loyal Labour electorate, millions of voters deserted them, reducing them to 600,000 votes fewer than Jeremy Corbyn got in 2019 in what Labour leaders, today's Labour leaders, described as the worst election result in Labour's history. Worst. They scored 600,000 votes fewer, and they scored millions of votes fewer than Jeremy Corbyn obtained in 2017. The fact that amongst young people, amongst Muslim people, they have lost millions of votes, lost 5 seats to Gaza independence, were narrowly, very closely, almost defeated in several others, including my own, appears not to have caused a single moment of soul searching. Not one moment. When they lost the red wall, they said they would address the concerns of the red wall voters. When it comes to the voters who've deserted them over the slaughter in Gaza, they are reduced to calling us thugs. It was thuggery that lost them those 5 parliamentary seats. It was thuggery that almost cost them many, many more. It was thuggery and intimidation that led to their catastrophic decline in formerly loyal voting blocs. None of them seem to have a single idea of how to handle us. Well, tune in to my meeting tomorrow night, the Fight Back in Rochdale, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two. Fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be the mother of all talk shows.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As vicious as the Twitter sphere, where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, if you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland. 08081 965522. And the number worldwide outside of those 4 countries is 44203 966 2625. And a big welcome if you are listening to the show rather than watching it on KPFK. That's 90.7 FM right across Los Angeles and Southern California. Now, who better to turn to in this moment of national drama with international ramifications of great moment than Garland Nixon, radio talk show host and political analyst supreme. Well, Garland, I don't know if the Secret Service shouted Donald Duck and it was misunderstood, but they sure made a mess of protecting Donald Trump in Pennsylvania yesterday. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, they did make a mess, and there seems to be some very serious problems with what happened, some very serious deficiencies, which I think, George, should take us immediately to the discussion that's being had here, to the honest discussion that's being had here. True, false, or indifferent. People are hearkening back to 2017 when Kathy Griffin held up a bloody Trump head, right? And, assassinated Trump in effigy, shall we say. They're going back to 2017 when Chuck Schumer said the intelligence community has 6 waves from Sunday to getting back at Trump should he, cross the intelligence community. They're thinking back to July 1st, just 2 weeks ago, when David Aronovich from the BBC tweeted that Biden should murder Donald Trump, tweeted that, and then took the tweet back and said it was misinterpreted. So I think what's going on, one of the things that's going on here is that very quietly, not on the media, certainly not in the media, but on the streets, people are asking the question, was this a lone gunman? Was this another assassination such as JFK or RFK, where somehow the intelligence community was involved in an assassination or an assassination on a major public figure? Probably the story of Martin Luther King and his assassin and all the questions there. So it may very well be that this person that killed Donald Trump was a lone gunman who had no assistance or guidance from the intelligence community. But that doesn't mean that these questions are not going to be asked and raised, and these suspicions are not going to be suspected, shall we say.
Well, I think, either they're totally incompetent or they were involved. To me, it's binary. Call me old-fashioned, but if I'm a heavily armed Secret Service man and I see a man, as they did see him, we've got pictures of them seeing him in a prone position, holding a rifle behind the President of the United States, well, I'd say that was likely to be an assassination attempt. So either they are totally incompetent or they're involved, don't you think?
Absolutely. And given the history, there's 2 parts of it. As I said, it could possibly be that this is just an individual who was mentally ill or whatever you want to think of, right? But here's the reality of it. But who's going to believe that? Most of the people on the street, as a rule, are not going to believe that, particularly after years of Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Donald Trump is a traitor to America. Well, what is supposed to happen to traitors? So either, and again, this is a discussion on the street, either, some intelligence community figures were involved, or perhaps, which is kind of equally as bad, the constant drumbeat of Donald Trump being a threat to America, demonizing Donald Trump, creating an environment where he was seen as, the end of the world's going to happen if Donald Trump becomes president, created an environment where somewhere out there a weak link, a weak-minded person was bound to take this kind of action again. As you know, George, we've had this discussion right on this show, you and I, as to whether or not this type of thing would happen after everything they've done to take Donald Trump out. And of course, the history, all you got to do is look at everyone who's crossed the Clintons. I think they've got their own section in Arlington Graveyard for the number of people that have mysteriously passed away as a result of, an unfortunate misunderstanding with Bill and Hillary.
Yeah, and then that's before turning to Barack Obama's chefs, plural. Let's talk about this Trump derangement syndrome, which is the cause, bound to be the cause of the events yesterday, whether you believe one of the two theories I have expounded or the other, it still all comes back to Trump derangement syndrome. Now, as I said in my introduction, it's not that Trump drained the swamp or Trump acted for Putin's interest in his first term, or Trump's a revolutionary, because he's none of those things. Isn't it the case that it is simply this, that he is unreliable for the deep state? He might take a different point of view to them on the Ukraine or on other conflicts around the world. That he might decide, no, I'm going to strike a deal here because I'm the big deal maker and so on. In other words, he could not be relied upon to follow orders of the deep state as much as the Democratic nominee, whoever they were, could be relied upon.
You're 100% right. And that automatically takes us to the conversation of where did Trump derangement syndrome come from? It wasn't a political operation. It was an intelligence operation. Let's not forget, they lied to a court 17 times in order to get the clearance from the court to be able to spy on the Trump campaign. Let's not forget that they grabbed Hunter Biden's laptop to stop Trump from winning. They had it for a year. The FBI had, I have to go over this, the FBI had Hunter Biden's laptop for 1 year. They knew that it was in fact Hunter Biden's laptop. And what did they do just prior to the 2020 election? They went to Twitter and they went to these social media organizations and the media, and they said, if someone comes to you and tells you that there's a Hunter Biden laptop out there, I don't believe them. That's just Russian propaganda. And, Trump and his people and Rudy Giuliani, they're spreading Russian propaganda, and we'll help you censor that. So they lied. They did election interference. They did illegal operations. A man was literally prosecuted and found guilty for a crime that he committed during the investigation to go after Donald Trump. So they investigated, they lied, and they created an environment where Donald Trump was a Russian bot, whatever the case may be. And so the intelligence community, as you said, saw Donald Trump as a threat. To neutralize that threat, they demonized him to the entire country. And I believe that this is one way or the other, this is part of the result of that. The other part I might add is in talking to people in the party, particularly the Democratic Party these days, it's a brainwash cult. The things that these people believe, it's absolutely preposterous. And they have the nerve to point to other people and say, well, they're crazy QAnon conspiracy theorists. And when you listen to what they say, it's, their minds have been completely brainwashed by the intelligence community.
Now, what happens next, Garland? Joe Biden, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's not November yet. Joe Biden has just addressed the nation from the White House. He's announced a security review. This is the man that denied RFK Jr. Secret Service protection, despite the fact he's got RFK Jr.'s father's statue in his office and claims to have been a fan of John Kennedy, the slain president, but they denied RFK Jr. protection. What kind of security review might we expect, and what does it even mean?
Well, from the looks of the way things went down yesterday, RFK Jr. may be far better off if he doesn't have Secret Service protection. Perhaps he should go along with his own protection and people that he can trust and that are more competent. But that being said, one of the things that's happened here is that this is taken away from the discussion that we have a president who is completely and totally incompetent for any number of reasons. But number two, that there is infighting in the Democratic Party as to how they're going to get rid of Joe Biden. The polls are plunging. The party has become a laughing stock. It's sitting in tatters. And Donald Trump is positioned to win, which some may believe could have in fact incited this this unfortunate incident that happened yesterday. So we're sitting here with a fundamentally broken country, might I add, that NATO just met in D.C. They released a document that said they were bound by their commitment to human rights and the rule of law as they commit a genocide in Gaza. They released a document that said all countries have the right to choose their own security arrangements, with the exception of all countries in the Western Hemisphere, because the United States claims the Monroe Doctrine says that no countries in the Western Hemisphere have a right to choose their own security arrangement. So this place is broken. When you the discussion of, I'll say this, the discussion of some kind of a civil war here, in my opinion, would look a lot more like the French Revolution than it would the war in the 1860s, because even the Trump people who are furious, they're not furious at the guy walking down the street, their neighbor walking down the street. They may disagree with them or even be angry at him. They're furious at the deep state. They're furious at the government. They believe that the government, through either its inability to protect him or through some intentional act, was really at fault here. So the anger from everybody in America is more directed upward to the ruling elite than it is, towards each other, towards their fellow working class people.
Well, let's hope so. Now, I've basically abandoned our poll this evening. 17,000 people have voted. It was George Clooney bringing down Joe Biden. But my thesis now is that nobody will bring down Joe Biden, because Trump's going to win such a big victory. Nobody else wants to be the loser in November's election. So they might as well let it be old Joe, and then they'll put it down to old Joe's failings. What's your feeling on that?
I think that's a solid argument, and you'll have to add this. The Ukraine crisis is in total disaster and collapse. The Ukraine project is in collapse. The Gaza, the Zionist project is in collapse. Our economy, has one foot in the grave and the other on a patch of ice, as I like to say, right? Everything is on the edge of collapse. It would not surprise me if the Democrats' plan is to try to hold on to things until January 20th, knowing that they're all going to fall apart, and then say, okay, well, Trump's in charge, even if it falls apart on January 21st, to say, the collapse is Donald Trump's fault, because they know that right now we're in a house of cards, and it's only going to take one card yanked out of the bottom for our foreign policy, our domestic policy, and our economy to come tumbling down.
Yeah, meanwhile, for 7 whole months, a long time in politics and in war, a man who's periodically at least brain dead is in charge not just of your country's affairs, but all of the Western countries' affairs. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that?
And what we see here now is, and it's fairly obviously that Joe Biden isn't in charge per se, that he's not making the decisions. I personally suspect what we're looking at more of is a Blinken-Sullivan administration, which is horrifying, because those people are both completely unable to make competent decisions. They're both hapless bunglers, and they're, ideological madmen. They are basically fascists. They are bent on world domination at a time when the U.S. should be trying to patch itself together. So the other part of it is, it's sadly, in a way, it's good for Americans to learn what most of us already know, and that is that the president is not in charge, that even Barack Obama and Bill Clinton supposedly are working to pick Joe Biden's replacement, but we know they're not the ones making the decision, that someone else is saying to them, yeah, here's the group of people that you can choose from to replace Joe Biden, should they choose to do that. So I think the curtain is starting to is starting to fall, and people are starting to see that behind the curtain there are puppeteers, that the people that they thought was in charge isn't really in charge, which means that even the illusion of democracy no more is holding up. That's all we had, was an illusion that we voted someone into power and that person made decisions. That was always illusion, but even that illusion is starting to crumble.
Joe Biden fell over and over and over again, off a bike, on the stairs, on the platform. Donald Trump fell, but he got back up again. And those images of blood on his face and his fist raised, chanting, "Fight, fight," they'll never be forgotten, will they?
Oh, absolutely not. I do think that there are a lot of people who supported Donald Trump, and a lot of people who were maybe on the edge of supporting Donald Trump, that this is the image there is one of a person who's tough, or one of a person who got shot and, in the line of duty, shall we say. So, I mean, the kind of metaphorical image of what happened is very, very powerful for a person who's running for president. And I think the way that he has reacted to this has been professional. A lot of people thought that Donald Trump would ramble or say crazy things, but he's been very professional. He has admonished his supporters from, taking any kind of outlandish acts. He said, look, let's kind of wait and see what happens, et cetera. I think Donald Trump's really been really, and I'm not a Trump fan whatsoever. I'm way over to the left like you. I'll probably write in the ghost of Hugo Chavez for president again. But being honest about it, he's done a really good job here of responding to this. And of course, everyone knows that Joe Biden is not mentally competent, and that we, from day to day, we don't know what we're going to get from this guy. But the one thing Joe Biden has is a great insurance policy, though. He has Kamala Harris. That is the best insurance policy any president could ever have. Because even though, the guy right now is completely unable to, really find his way around the stage most of the time, the more you look at Kamala Harris, the better Joe Biden looks. That's how bad she is. I would imagine the Democratic Party is horrified of putting Kamala Harris out to have her start her weird word salad, really silly discussions that she have, because that'll be it for the party at that point. They think they've got it bad now. They will lose bad with Joe Biden. I think if they stick Kamala Harris out there, it will expose that they really stuck her out there just because she checked a bunch of boxes, and at least Biden has an excuse for being incompetent. She doesn't have an excuse. She's supposed to be the young, black, bright, whatever the case may, up-and-coming politician, and she is a disaster.
Yeah, she's Spyro Agnew in high heels. Thanks, Garland, as always, for that tour of the American horizon. Now, it's time for a quick break, and then it's your calls all the way to the hour. Stay tuned. As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire. Now, the MOATS podcast is breaking records all over the world, and this one is a humdinger. Our podcast entered the top 10 in China this week. That's some achievement, don't you think? We're also very big in Ghana and the United Arab Emirates this week. You can download the podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen Now, let's go to the lines. In Quebec is Lise on Trump. Go ahead, Lise.
Hi, George. Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it. Just want to make two very quick comments. Given that, it's ironic that the whole assassination attempt seemed to have occurred the exact same way that the JFK assassination attempt occurred, which I thought was kind of funny. You'd think that they would have come up with a better plan. So I do believe literally that it's the United States government that did this attempt because of Joe Biden's, as you would put it, I'll be a little bit more diminished mind capacity.
Yeah.
And also, just a very quick comment that we are in a cusp right now of historical changes. And history has shown that all superpowers fall. And being in Canada right next to the United States, the problem with Canadian politics is that we have a bunch of psychopathic, narcissistic people in charge. And we just do what the Americans tell us to do. And whatever occurs in the United States, we always say, they sneeze and we catch the cold. So Canada's really, I just wish that more Canadians would wake up and see that this is a real historical change that is occurring. And frankly, as a Canadian at this point, with everything that's going on, I'm scared for my country.
Yeah, well, mind you, I watched Mick Jagger, aged 81 and still moving like Mick Jagger. He, on the stage, paid tribute to the Trudeau family, to a huge audience of Canadian young people, I guess. And he was stunned at the response from the crowd. To say they gave Trudeau the bird was, he was literally frozen. Mick, he couldn't react. He couldn't believe that by just saying the word Trudeau, this wave of hostility in the stadium rolled his way. And Trudeau looks doomed in the upcoming elections in Canada, no?
Yeah, but we don't have anybody better either. We've got Polyev, which is no good for nothing any more than Trudeau is. So we're in trouble.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's the same in many countries in the West. Lise, thanks for that great call. Simon Milner says, Trump with his Iwo Jima photo wins any election hands down. For me, the mugshot was an election winner. The Iwo Jima, blood smeared across the face, fist clenched. You could not make that optic up, and there's no need to. Mark is in Liverpool on Trump. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, George. Pleasure to speak to you. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points on the situation. I just find it hypocritical that everyone has hated on Donald Trump. They've wanted him gone, and they're now dousing the flames with fake sympathy. And by no means a fan of his. However, no politician, no civilian for that matter, should be targeted for their beliefs in modern politics and modern life. My main point, though, is the gun control laws in the US. And could this, to be like coining a British phrase, be coming back to bite Donald Trump on the bum with his endorsement on that actual point? And then the last wider point...
I really don't... sorry, go on, Mark.
Oh, sorry, it was just a last quick point. Just to quote our election in the UK, is this the best that we have, these two politicians? Is this the best that the US can give up as candidates to run the free world?
Well, you could equally apply that to us, Mark. That is indeed the $64,000 question, as those of a certain age will recall. The $64,000 question is, how can a country like America produce this dichotomy, Trump versus Biden? But how could a country like Britain, with all of its history, produce a dichotomy of Sunak versus Starmer? And you could say it in many other Western countries too. The idea that you're going to get gun control in the United States now is, of course, entirely fanciful. If I were an American, I would not be giving up my guns at this point in my country's history. In fact, I'd be making sure I was well stocked up. This is the last moment in the world, in the history of the country, that the people of America are going to allow the government that might just have been involved in trying to assassinate their putative leader, hand over your guns to the government? Not likely. Now, with breaking news on Joe Biden's national address, it's Simon from Weaponized News, otherwise known as the legend, Simon in Florida. Go ahead, Simon.
Greeting to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. Well, right up-to-date news that happened within the last hour, 36 minutes late, having made the entire nation wait on tenterhooks for his undoubtedly excellently scripted remarks. President Biden appeared in the White House, spoke for the grand total of 3 minutes, declined to take any questions, but did actually make a few important remarks. So whilst confirming that this was indeed regarded as an assassination attempt, which apparently many of the media had originally been told to downplay, at least from the mainstream point of view, he did ask everyone to not draw their own conclusions with regard to the shooter's possible affiliations or indeed his motives. Along that line, it's interesting to note that NBC, who are supposed to be interviewing President Biden tomorrow, have now suggested that possibly it was a right-wing shooter who was unhappy with former President Trump because he wasn't being conservative enough. So the alternative viewpoint has already been set in the public's minds there. It's quite incredible how far they're willing to go. But it seems the FBI was put in charge precisely because of the point that you have just made, sir, that maybe the government is involved. Not that I'd want to rely upon the FBI to come to that conclusion, but it does seem to have been taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States Secret Service. Now, the 4 points that he made, and he numbered them literally 1 through 4, was that Trump had all the security that anybody could want for, and all the technology was available to him. And so people need not be critical of that, which is contrary, once again, to the popular feeling in the country at this point, I feel confident of saying. He also pointed out that there'd be an immediate review of the security arrangements for the Republican National Convention, which is due to start tomorrow on the 15th of July. Trump had initially suggested that he was going to delay his attendance, and just moments ago, he's confirmed on his social media channels that he will indeed be resisting the pressure to avoid attending personally, and he will be there on time, beginning his travels very soon. The third point was that Biden announced that an independent review would be conducted, and rather surprisingly, given the sensitivity of the issue, that the full results would be made public. And the final point that he made was that he would bring more information to the nation at a speech to be telecast from the Oval Office later tonight, and that will be aired at 8 p.m. New York time, 1 a.m. London time. And so some of your audience may or may not wish to stay up for that, but it's likely possibly to start late again. I'll be covering that on my broadcast at 9 p.m. Eastern time on weaponizednews.com. But the other point that I'd like to make to you, and I appreciate this is a rather sensitive day and we're not going to be making any jokes about soccer, but in relation to the NATO conference, which I fear some of your associates may be making detailed conclusions about without having read all of the underlying documents, as I have done and as I've shared with your staff, it's worth noticing that the NATO attendees appeared to escape from reality. And on this day of soccer, possibly we should be watching the excellent 1981 movie with Pele, Michael Caine, and Sylvester Stallone, Escape to Victory.
Well, I'm not going to comment on the Euro finals, and I hope nobody tells me the score because I'm going to watch them right after the show. Thank you, Simon, as always. Let's go to Cheryl in Oklahoma. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yes, George. I'm so glad to be able to visit with you, and I think I probably now will be considered a wild conspiracist, but the immediate reaction I had from the Trump so-called assassination was somehow it didn't sit right. It looked staged for some reason. The crowd behind.
Well, it killed somebody in the crowd, Cheryl.
Yeah, I know they did.
It killed a man in the crowd that was shielding his daughter from the bullets.
An innocent bystander was killed, and it looked like Trump had something on his ear when he slapped it that let some blood out. Like I said, it might be a total conspiracy, but then nobody was concerned about a second shooter. I mean, he pops up and he waves and he gets some photo ops. It was just there's just so many weird things about even the Secret Service not looking at the guy. You know, I just feel like there's a lot going on that we don't know about, and it's not obvious from what we're seeing or being told. And, you know, it might be totally real, but like I said, there's some weird things, and it's not what I would normally think from something like this. And you can write me off.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Stark raving bonkers, if you ask me. But then sometimes that turns out to be closer to the truth. But I suspect, Cheryl, that you're evincing Trump derangement syndrome. I saw the bullet. I saw the picture of the bullet. I saw the ear. It reminded me of Evander Holyfield's ear after Mike Tyson bit it off. It was a wound of some substance, but you only have to look at your own head and your own ear and see how close something that hit your ear, how close it was to something that hit your brain. And I know that an upstanding man, a firefighter, was murdered by this individual, if it were he who fired the fatal shots, and that he died shielding his young daughter from the would-be assassin's bullets. So, staged? I don't think so. Thanks, Cheryl. You can't handle the truth, says your gun is not going to protect you from your government. Get real. You think you can fight the militarized police force by yourself? Stop watching too much Rambo movies, lol. Well, it might not, but at least I'd be able to take a couple of them down with me. But if I gave them back my gun, I wouldn't. Natalie D said FBI is in charge of uncovering their own plot. Love it. Brian Holden says the US has long ceased to be a republic and is a global dominating empire with over 900 military bases in 153 countries. And Anun Ganochi says Biden wished a speedy recovery to President Putin. Let me take a break, and then is the one and only Texas Rose Rachel Blevins, journalist and political commentator. And we've got Niko House later in the show. This is fast and furious, as well it might be on a night like this. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Let's go straight to Rachel Blevins, journalist, political commentator, and one of our most popular guests on the mother of all talk shows. Rachel, we might have been, but for a fraction of an inch, about half an inch, they say, having a very different conversation tonight. If we were indeed able to do it, a state of martial law might have had to be declared in your country, but for a half an inch. That's a pretty narrow escape, isn't it?
Oh, it definitely is. And I think everyone is still kind of in shock right now. I mean, for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about Joe Biden, right? Can he run? Is he up to the task? Is someone going to replace him? And Donald Trump has been the most sure candidate, right? We've watched him go through all of these different charges, at least one or two trials there with a couple more coming up. But all of this talk and all of this rhetoric has been that Trump is the dangerous candidate, that he is a threat to democracy, that we have to stop him from making it to election day. And so I know that there has been a lot of talk out there, just like what we saw with Robert Fico just a couple of months ago. The speculation has been that some deranged person could be driven to the point where they take all of those warnings, they take it seriously, and they attempt to end Trump's life altogether. Now, I know that there's a lot of speculation out there. I have been reading opinions and comments all over the place as to what actually led up to this, whether it was the Secret Service failure of the century, whether there was some sort of deep state element that was in on it. And unfortunately, when it comes to things like this, I feel like the answer is that here in the United States, we may never know. I mean, we're not allowed to talk about JFK, right? We know that in a lot of cases, obviously there was security there. There was Secret Service on the roof that took out what they are claiming is the shooter. But then we also have those people on the ground that say, hey, we saw a man on a roof with a rifle. We reported this to the police. And on top of that, unfortunately, we know that there are a number of different layers of police. So it brings up the question of, was this just a complete failure where you had local law enforcement who were supposed to be securing a certain area and they didn't? They failed to communicate with Secret Service? Or is there more to it, and does it get a lot more diabolical than that? And I know we are still just in the first 24 hours of this, but a lot of very serious questions here.
Well, you say shocked, and that's right, but not surprised, right? I have been predicting this very thing on this show and elsewhere for at least 1 year. I have repeatedly urged on here Trump to get rid of the Secret Service bodyguard, get a Russian set of bodyguards, hire anybody other than the people that were, from my point of view, certainly involved in the murders of JFK, of MLK, of Malcolm X, and of RFK. The truth is, the last people in the world you should look to secure you from this kind of event are the three-letter agencies in the United States who are most afraid of you.
Oh, I would agree with you on that one. I mean, I think that Trump has got to be waking up today, happy to be alive, but also looking around at every single Secret Service agent that is around him and wondering, okay, how do we proceed? And you know, it's been interesting to see some of the speculation on social media. You've got people claiming that Trump orchestrated this himself to become more popular. And yes, if you look back to someone like Ronald Reagan, an assassination attempt is likely to make him more popular. In fact, I would argue that Trump just about has the White House sealed at this point. It's hard to think that he doesn't. But I would argue that it's not actually his doing, that it's likely the doing of whether it is, you know, one individual, one crazed individual who decided that he was going to try to take out Trump after all of this rhetoric that we heard about him. But on top of that, this also sends a very important message. And I know that there has been a lot of talk. We get to this every election year, right, where we sit here and we go, why don't we have a candidate who is truly anti-war, right, who is going to not just speak out and call for an end to the U.S. support for the proxy war against Russia and Ukraine, but that is also against genocide in Gaza, that is against continuing on in this way as a U.S. empire that is bringing death and destruction all over the world. Why don't we see that as a prominent candidate? And for someone like Trump, right, he's someone who has raised questions, right? He has called out the deep state. He's called out these three-letter agencies. He's called out these endless wars around the world. And granted, while he hasn't, gotten into office and drained the swamp the first time around, while he hasn't made good on a lot of his promises, and while we still look at those promises and think, yeah, okay, it's great that Trump will say all of this, but is he actually going to do anything? I think it is a reminder of the message that is sent out that even just one individual who is willing to ask those questions at that level, they could still be targeted, even if they are not going to do everything that they say that they're going to do on the campaign trail. So it definitely does send a warning to any of the other would-be candidates or any, sort of activists within this country that are thinking, I really want to take on the deep state. I want to take on these three-letter agencies, and I want to change the course of where the United States is currently going. It's showing that they are up against a lot, and that could even lead to the end of their lives at some point.
That candidate could have been RFK Jr. Indeed, on almost all issues, he is that candidate. But he's fatally compromised by his maniacal attachment to Netanyahu, to Likud, to the massacre in Gaza, and so on. That will continue to bemuse me for a long time to come. Does it puzzle you?
It really does. And, looking at someone like RFK Jr., he seemed to be kind of that anti-establishment candidate that a lot of Americans crave, right? Where he's asking questions about Ukraine. He's going, wait a second, why is Congress signing off on, $200 billion worth of support, yet we have no accountability, no transparency? And it seemed like he almost was that challenger, and then October 7th came. And any of the questions that a lot of us were asking, going, wait a second, Israel was warned about this. Wait a second, Israel had a lot of these plans in the books for some kind of greater Israel where they wanted to take over more and more land. They wanted to expel the Palestinian people from their land, and they are using this excuse as this attack, as an excuse to commit genocide in front of all of our eyes. While we all were sitting there and saying that, RFK Jr. was sitting there and defending Israel and defending U.S. support for Israel. He was being openly complicit in genocide and proud to do so. And I think that's the major sticking point that has plagued every major, I would say, political candidate, at least in this race. Now, we have a few. We have, Jill Stein for the Green Party, Chase Oliver for the Libertarian Party, who are speaking out, are calling it genocide, and have been there. But if you notice, they're not getting a lot of media attention or coverage. However, people like Trump, right, who have been very outspoken in their support of Israel, have shown their support of Israel and have even referred to Biden as a bad Palestinian, as if that is some kind of a criticism that he should make of him. We also have Biden, who obviously right now is completely complicit in that genocide. I think it just goes to show that the U.S. has a major problem right now. And even as this week, you had intelligence officials coming out, and guess what? They're blaming about Russian interference in the upcoming election after blaming about interference from China and from Iran. And it's like they want to sit there and talk about foreign interference, yet they don't want to talk about interference coming from Israel, or they don't want to talk about how much money AIPAC fuels into every single member of Congress they can possibly get to, and how, as in the case of Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, when you actually speak out and you challenge Israel, when you say that criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitism, they go after your challengers and they prop up your challengers to try to get you out of office. The U.S. has a lot of major issues, and I think that the assassination attempt against Trump is just one of those on a very long list that this country really needs to contend with.
Is Joe Biden safe as nominee now, Rachel? Seems to me that if Trump looks unstoppable, then who else would want to be the one that got swept away in the Trump tsunami of 2024?
That is an interesting question. And I'm kind of in that place of thinking, well, it does look like Biden is safe, right? All he has to do is just get through November, because you're right. Who wants to step out now and be the Democratic challenger? Who wants to be the person going up against Trump? I mean, we haven't seen the polls yet. I know that there are polls running right now, and they are likely to show Trump with a significant lead. I am very curious to see, though, how Democrats in this country will react, because you had a lot of people yesterday that were watching this assassination attempt unfold and saying, oh, that must have been Trump's doing. He did it to himself to make him more popular. So my question is, are they going to go out and to vote for Joe Biden, or are they going to stay home and decide not to vote at all? But it'll be very interesting to see. I think a lot of that is almost up to just how much Joe Biden can get through. I mean, we saw this has been a truly disastrous week for the man, as he was in a position of, he apparently thinks that Trump is his vice president, and he thinks that Zelensky is President Putin, and he can't seem to get any of these names straight, and it just causes a lot of concern about what he's able to get through. We do have that next presidential debate coming up in September, so a lot on the line here, but I know Democrats may be in a situation right now of thinking, thank goodness the media coverage has shifted to Trump, because they don't have to talk about Biden and all of the concerns that they've been having to at least address and acknowledge about him lately.
Just finally, Rachel, what can you tell us about the alleged shooter? He can't tell us anything, like Lee Harvey Oswald in a police garage. He's stone dead. The first name that we were given, a fellow called Violet, surname Violet, he's disappeared. If you Google him now, you won't be able to get to that name. The name now is Thomas Crooks, age 20. Pretty accurate rifle fire for a 20-year-old from a roof at 120 or 30 yards. He is said to be of Scottish and English descent, unfortunately for us. Are people actively trying to find out who he is? I mean, the notion that he was a right-winger who wanted to kill Trump because he wasn't right-wing enough will be laughed at by ordinary people around the world, I think. But what can you tell us about him, if anything?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that he's also, much like Lee Harvey Oswald, he's also being referred to by three names as Thomas Michael Crooks. I'm not sure if that's just the media kind of throwing it out there or what's behind him. But yeah, a lot of confusion here. This seems to be this 20-year-old who was not even old enough to vote the last presidential election that we had. This would be his first presidential election coming up if he had made it to that point. I know it was being put out there that he had registered as a Republican, but there were also some reports that he had donated $15 to a PAC, a political action committee, on Biden's inauguration day. Now, granted, a lot of reports, a lot of speculation going on out there. And so I think that given that it is still those early hours, we are likely to learn more about him. But I've seen the photos. It seems like people are digging up grade school photos, high school graduation school photos, and putting all of that out on the internet. It doesn't seem like we have any kind of manifesto yet, which I would think, arguably, if you were someone who was going to attempt to assassinate the president of the United States, you would have some kind of message, some kind of this is why I did this. It doesn't seem like we have that, and I'm with you. It has been really confusing, not a lot of information put out there, and I'm not sure quite what's behind that and how much of this is just, again, going back to Secret Service and law enforcement trying to clean up this complete mess, because it looks absolutely ridiculous to think that here in this country at a campaign rally like this one, they were not able to keep it completely secure, and they were either not on top of their game because they screwed up or not on top of their game because they willingly allowed the former president, who is now the front runner to be the next president, allowed him to be almost assassinated again, going back to that fact that if he had not moved his head, he likely would not be with us today.
I've got to tell you, quite eerily, that picture that we just put up of Mr. Crooks, he even looks like Lee Harvey Oswald. Thanks very much, Rachel Blevins, for your wisdom. Thanks for joining us. Now, the Ron says there's only one presidential candidate who's not an imperialist or a Zionist. Unfortunately, Americans are too caught up in the political drama to vote for her. The numbers again, in the US and Canada, it's toll free, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081 965522, and in the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. Coming up next, it's the one and only Niko House, political commentator and founder of the MCSE network. We don't want to miss him. But first, we've got on the line in New York, it's Melvin. He's always worth hearing. Melvin, what's your take on all of this?
Well, okay, so first of all, it's very nice to talk to you again, George. But when it comes to it, a lot of people have talked about this, and there's been some discussion if it was a 22 or a higher caliber. Now, I did a little research. I did come up with an article that said it was a NATO round with a AR-15. However, even if it was a 22...
Really? It sounded like a 22 to me, Melvin.
Yeah.
It sounded like a 22 to me.
True. And it did sound like it as well. However, I will add that that is an extremely short distance, and I did watch one of the guys there literally saying how for 3 minutes he was notifying the police, pointing up at the shooter. This is a very close distance. I mean, between 120 and 130 yards. I take a deer out with that with a shotgun. I know my guns. I'm huntering that. So, and I have used 22s in the past for varmint shooting and stuff like that. For someone that young to get that close, this is either one of two things. This is complete, negligence on them, or it is premeditated. Now, I will add that, and this is the part I wanted to get to, I will add that I know, and there have been reports and record of it, where the police, the FBI, in the past have taken people that were somewhat radicalized and helped them in their radicalization. Usually they have said that we stopped a terrorist or something like that. And this has been in the past. There's been reports. I'm sure you've heard of it. In this kid's case,
yeah, sure.
I'm thinking that might be what it is, because I don't see any other reason that they would ignore that situation, or at the very least, if somebody said, hey, I see something guy with a gun up on a roof that's not supposed to be there, and immediately take down the president. I don't know. Tell me what your points are.
Well, I agree with that. It's either grotesque negligence or it is collusion. And as to who the young man was, now we can say in the past tense, it's perfectly possible. It's happened in many places, even in my own country, never mind in yours, where someone is taken under the wing of the deep state and prepared for a role such as this. They always, of course, would have a big picture justification of it, that it would lead to the unmasking of wider conspiracies or bigger fish and so on. But agencies run agents. They ran them in the north of Ireland. They run them in the United States amongst Muslim communities, for example. They pick someone, they teach them how to sound and act in the most radical way possible, see what happens, see who is drawn to him, and then bang, you've got a conspiracy, bang, you've got a whole lot of jail time being served. You've got a whole lot of people that you consider to be dangerous to your way of thinking out of the firing line. So either a guy, a 20-year-old guy with a rifle and a ladder is able to scale a roof in the eye line of Secret Service snipers and crawl around that roof, get himself into a firing position, loose off at least 3 rounds of whatever caliber before being shot dead, despite the fact that multiple, and I've seen at least 10 interviews with people who warned the police that there was someone with a gun on that roof. Now, I'm sorry, but either they are Keystone cops, idiots, the gang that couldn't shoot straight, or someone in the deep state was involved in this, wanted it to happen. And given the scale of the dog whistling from the deep state and its public mouthpieces, Pelosi, Obama, Biden, over and over again. Just days ago, Biden said, we have to put Donald Trump in the bullseye. Well, I mean, what does that mean, Melvin?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm pretty sure that it is a deep state thing.
Feels like it to me, mate. Thanks for the call. Robus, our great legend, says, reporter, did you shoot the president? No, I'm just a patsy. Lee Harvey Oswald. Let me take a quick break, then it's Niko House. Stay tuned. Why don't we suspend all candidates in all parties, in all elections, until Israel approves them? Is that the democracy we want? And we have to ask ourselves, why is the entire political class in Britain in thrall to a tiny little country 2,200 miles away from here, and nothing can be said by anybody here which they don't like? What is it? What hold is it that this little country has on our politics in Western countries? We all know in America it's about money, but the sums of money here in Britain are paltry. By American standards, you'd laugh. Are these people enthralled to Israel for £3,000, £4,000 or £5,000, in which case they're precious cheap? If other lobbyists knew how cheap they were, they'd be moving in and getting a piece of the action. I don't know what the situation is. I don't know why they are so terrified of Israel that they're ready to sack their own candidates in the middle of a by-election. That's how scared of Israel they are. And when this is all over, we have to ask ourselves how, why, when British politics became effectively outsourced to Netanyahu's Israel, whose pleasure or displeasure dictates who can stand, who can win, who can be elected, and what policy they can follow.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to Niko House, political commentator, American in exile, founder of the MCSC network. Niko, I want to talk to you about the situation in Gaza, but before we turn to it, what's your reading on what we all witnessed in Pennsylvania yesterday?
To be completely honest, I feel like it was an inside job. I know a lot of people would want to believe and find it easy to believe that it was like a false flag or Trump trying to promote himself. But to be honest, he had nothing to gain from this. He was already beating Biden into a pulp, or rather Biden and the Democrats were beating themselves. So there would be no reason for him to do this. Let's not forget, tomorrow is the Republican convention. And if Trump was taken out yesterday, guess who would be the Republican nominee, George? Nikki Haley. So in other words, you end up with an imperialist or a worse imperialist if Trump is out. But the common denominator between a Nikki Haley and a Biden or a Kamala, for example, is predictability. And to be honest, this wouldn't be the first time that the U.S. government has conspired from the inside to try and take out Trump in one form or another. People seem to forget Andrew McCabe was fired by the FBI because he conspired with the Clintons and others to propagate this Russiagate nonsense. James Comey, same thing. Other members of the FBI, same thing. So this isn't the first time that, it wouldn't be the first time that the intelligence community or the powers that be conspire from within to take out Trump, because as bad as Trump has been on many policies, whether it be the coup in Bolivia, taking out Soleimani, Syria, even domestic policy, the problem that they've always had with Trump is that he's not bad enough, which is why they put Biden in place to begin with.
Not bad enough, and the key word you used there, unpredictability. They can deal with Nikki Haley because they can be absolutely certain. The notes that she will strike, the policies that she will support, she'll take her hymn sheet from Netanyahu, especially, but she'll toe the line on NATO, the war in Ukraine, and so on. You can't guarantee that Trump will do any of those things.
Yeah, you can actually guarantee that he has a problem with Zelensky and giving all this money to the Russia-Ukraine war. He's voiced that. He's also been a little bit wishy-washy, if you will, when it comes to Netanyahu's actions in Gaza. Trump has an ego problem, and he is a man who is well conscious about the PR that surrounds him, and he does not like to be associated with losers. And Netanyahu right now is not very well liked on an international stage, and he a lot of the times has a bigger ego than Trump has, and Trump does not like to compete in that regard. So it isn't like Trump's death would necessarily or exclusively only benefit Democrats. People forget that these policies benefit whether it be Gaza, whether it be especially this war with Ukraine. It benefits the Democrats, but it more so benefits the globalist elite, the members of the Atlantic Council, for example, NATO members, everyone who's profited in some way, form, or fashion from the war and corruption in Ukraine, not just over the last couple of years, but really since starting before 2014. And Trump is, I would feel like it's pretty safe to say, a vindictive man, especially considering he did not go as hard as he could have against Hillary Clinton, all those who conspired against him in 2016. And even though he kind of let them slide, even though I believe, it was against the better judgment of literally everybody, I feel like he should have convicted her, or at least attempted to, given what she participated in. He didn't put Andrew McCabe in jail. He didn't even put James Comey in jail. And despite that, they still weaponized the justice system against him over the last 3.5 years to prevent him from running again. So if he gets into power this time, he doesn't have another election to worry about. He doesn't have any of it. The reins are off. He can do what he wants to, how he wants to do it, and he has a little bit more experience behind his belt this time. But more importantly, he has a vendetta. And I feel like a lot of people would feel the pain if he were to win, and that is what they're trying to prevent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good set of reasons for suspecting who was behind the gunman. And if the gunman was all that he is now being said to be. And if he was the gunman, if he was the only gunman, these are all questions that will swirl. We'll return on Wednesday to these things. But Niko, I wanted to talk to you about the situation in Gaza. You were out there in the region comparatively recently. One of the things that yesterday's events has wiped out is the fact that last week was an epic week of slaughter of civilians, families, women, children, in a place that the Israeli government had told them to go to as a safe zone. And it was Joe Biden's baby buster 500-pound bombs that they dropped on a camp, slaughtering well over 100 people in a single strike. Nobody's even talking about it. The blood of these children sure ain't as important as the blood coming out of Joe Biden's, Donald Trump's ear, is it?
Yeah, and it's sad because that isn't even the end of it, right? They dropped flyers telling them to leave Gaza City being a massive city, the largest city in Gaza in the north area, telling them to go south to another quote-unquote designated safe zone where, of course, it appears that they're just calling Palestinians. This effectively leaves them nowhere else to go. And a week prior to that, they announced plans to completely annex the West Bank, right? So if they can't go to the West Bank, and obviously we know that those Palestinians can't leave the West Bank, and then they're dropping bombs in northern Gaza, in central Gaza, and in southern Gaza, and in the safe zones. Once again, this calling it a genocide is almost not taking it far enough, because at least in a genocide, there seems to be, you can have people that you're trying to kill most of the people, but you're really trying to get them out of an area and erase them from the area. What this is an extermination. This is an extermination. There is a clear intent to kill everyone who will not leave. And even knowing that there is nowhere to go, there's literally just the sea where they're trying to send them to. There's the sea and there's Egypt. And Egypt has made it clear they're not going to continue to allow Israel to just push Palestinians in. So they're going to bomb them into oblivion. And once again, it seems like there is a certain value that has been put on other people's lives. But when it comes to these Arab Palestinians or the Syrians or the Lebanese, that value is not attached to their lives. And it is in time that we actually have an important conversation as to why that is.
Well, it's racism, pure and simple, isn't it? Israelis are projected to us as people like us, as indeed most of them are. They used to live near us, and now they live there on somebody else's land. They are people like us because they are overwhelmingly European people. At least the people in power, in wealth and power in Israel, are European people. So when I say people like us, I mean people like me. Forgive me.
There are a couple that look like me in Israel, but you are right. The ones that look like me, they get treated as such, right? Those of African descent, a lot of the Sephardic Israelis, they get treated as such. And although you might, every now and then, you might try to see Israel put them on a poster for the IDF, because everyone starts to call out their racism, so they have to prove that they're not actually all European or all racist. The truth of the matter is, when those cameras are off, and in real life, because I actually know Israelis, those black and brown Israelis do get treated as somebody in the U.S. would get treated. But you're right, they present them like they presented the Ukrainians, right? The Ukrainians, when the war started and they were claiming refugee status in Europe, they said we have to accept them because they're European like us. They look like us. Even in the United States, they're getting Social Security benefits. 100,000 at least have gotten Social Security benefits. Why? Because they're quote unquote like the majority of the United States. But when it comes to like victims from political refugees from Haiti, for example, they're being treated like garbage. They're being treated like predators when they're just trying to find a home because their home has been destroyed too. In a lot of ways, like for the same reasons as the homes in Ukraine have been destroyed because of the United States involvement. So the only difference might be the belief system and the skin tone.
I don't know why, but what you just said there sparked a question in my mind. in normal times, if there are anything that can be called normal times, living in Israel is a good life. It's a very beautiful country, nice beaches, and a high standard of living, at least a European standard of living. I wonder if Americans know that Israeli citizens have so many things that American citizens don't have. Free health service, free university, free education. They have benefits to Israelis that Americans can only dream of, and yet it's the American taxpayer that's paying for it all. Does that ever occur or arise as a question?
Yeah, I mean, when you say more than they can imagine, it's literally more than they can imagine. For example, if you do enough time in the IDF, for example, you can either get a full cash grant given to you. They can give you a business loan for you to start a business in Israel or in another country that you may have citizenship, or they'll even pay for your wedding if you're going to get married. You can do any of those things. If you get fired from a job, or if you even choose just to leave a job, you get severance pay in a lump sum usually. The benefits of Israel, I mean, there are people, depending on what your job is, right? If you get a job in the United States, they arrive in the United States and they get a social security card. They have high credit. They're offered scholarships and grant money to many of our elite institutions and colleges. And people have no idea that this is happening. And what's crazier is the fact that many Israelis, and these aren't even the ones that have the citizenship in multiple countries. These are the ones that just come out of Israel, not even the ones that are being able to take advantage of citizenship in maybe the EU or the United States. But those Israelis aren't even aware that their benefits are that unique. And most Americans aren't really talking to Israeli about those benefits because a lot of them are just busy scapegoating immigrants who are paying their taxes, but because of the complexities and how expensive it is to get a citizenship in the United States, they think that those immigrants don't deserve the same dignity and benefits, even though they're paying for them. But when it comes to Israel, all the benefits that they're receiving, whether it be in Israel or their home country or in the United States when they're coming to visit and work, we're paying for it. We have given more aid to Israel than any other foreign power in the world. We've given more aid, both military and just regular humanitarian aid to Israel. That's insane because we don't really know why, because not only does the United States give it to them, but the rest of the Western world gives them aid. They're living and leeching off of the Western world, but yet they seem to only answer to themselves.
Extraordinary. Niko House, as always, great to hear from you. Sorry it's shorter tonight because of the fast-moving story. Let's go to Peter in York, who has a different opinion on the Trump affair. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, George. I was just wondering, I would like your opinion about an alternative theory I have regarding why the deep state / the establishment dislike Trump. Now, it's not because he's a Putin puppet, because he was more belligerent towards Russia and Putin than his predecessor. It wasn't because he is against wars. He actually increased the bombing rates of all the wars that were currently that he adopted. And you don't have to take my word for this. You can talk to Aaron Marte about this, because he's the one that reported on this. He didn't clear the swamp, like you say, like you've said a million times. He actually got the worst swamp creatures and put in his cabinet. I think the reason why that Trump is so hated by the establishment is because he dared to utter the words, "Lock her up." I think we all know what happens to anyone that crosses the Clintons. Many of them are not walking on this planet anymore. And I think that this really is why the deep state don't like Trump, is because of the Clintons. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, as Garland Nixon said earlier, there's a whole special section in Arlington Cemetery devoted to people who've crossed the Clintons. And don't be a chef applying for a job with the Obamas either. But it's not. The deep state long predates Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and its perfidy. long predates them. Bill Clinton was scarcely born when the great crimes of the 1960s were committed by the deep state against their own people, against their own leading people, including their own president and the man who was about to become their president, but against millions of others around the world. I think if you tied me down, it's Ukraine. They cannot bear that Donald Trump will end the war in Ukraine. He may proliferate wars everywhere else, but he's made it plain enough that he thinks that Zelensky is a chiseling little crook and that he makes off with 10 scores of billions of dollars every time he comes to the United States. He's going to stop that. And he's going to prosecute the corruption that involves American politicians, not just the Biden crime family, but the Kerry crime family and other Democratic Party grandee crime families. He's going to unmask all that. He's going to reveal all that. That's, if you tied me down, the number one problem that they have with Trump, that he will not continue the path to World War III, at least not in Ukraine. He might do so elsewhere, but at least not in Ukraine. Thank you, Peter. Let's go to Texas, where Prince wants to talk about Gaza and Trump. Go ahead, Prince.
Hey, George, I just want to make 3 quick points. So the first one is that at what point do we start holding the Western society complicit in all the crimes of the government? Because, for instance, you were voted out and you gave Labour a mandate to continue, even though Pierre Starmer is a Zionist, an avowed Zionist, to continue killing people in Gaza. At what point do people start voting for this clown? The second point is I went online this morning and I was looking at scrolling through comment sections, and I see liberals are all there, they are celebrating Trump's being shot, or they're actually saying that, oh, Trump planted himself. So when it's conspiracy theories, these liberals, they jump on it. And I always say progressives are just like liberals. You know, they're the same people. They're just poor liberals who want healthcare. These people, people like AOC and the rest, they have all endorsed Biden, even though they say Biden is committing a genocide. What crime is worse than committing a genocide? Let's not kid ourselves. Israel would not even continue what it's doing today if America did not support it, if Biden did not support it, but yet you endorse him. So where's your morality? I mean, what are you opposing if you cannot dissociate from somebody who's supporting a genocide? They resumed shipping to the
well, not just Prince, not just AOC. Bernie Sanders has become almost evangelically and umbilically tied to crazy Joe Biden, despite the crimes of the Biden era against the Palestinian people that Bernie Sanders used to say he was sympathetic to. These people have destroyed their own reputation. They are not progressives. They're not even liberals. Being a liberal isn't just about caring about pronouns and being kind to people when you meet them if they are different to you. That's not liberalism. That is virtue signaling. You're not a liberal if you are ready to see women and children massacred in Gaza by your own country. You're not a feminist if you don't give a damn about the murder and mutilation of women in Gaza and elsewhere. You're not interested in children's rights, in abortion arguments. If you are ready to see even the unborn and the small babies and children murdered and mutilated in Gaza, in what sense do you care about children? You're just a piece of lipstick on the imperialist pig. And that goes for AOC also. I've got my own good wife right next to me in the studio. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, how were we to know that the poll would be overtaken
by what happened last night. And how fast did it go? Well, I say so, but only 2 days ago, you were on Red Pill, the interview, and you were just saying this.
48 hours before it happened.
You were just saying this. So Joseph says, Prophet George predicted it. It happened. It happened. It happened last night at a very fast pace. We did ask whether George Clooney will bring Joe Biden down, but it's obviously...
Who's George Clooney?
Who's George Clooney? It's Joe Biden himself and Trump and everyone treating Trump who will bring Trump down, of course. Charlotte Burns says these Trump's assassins will bring Biden down. Trump is going to get so much sympathy out of this, and many will blame the Dems. They've tried lawfare, they've tried Russiagate, so they'll naturally think that the Dems tried assassination as a last resort. So this could possibly ensure Trump's win. Well, possibly, yes. Andrew Lawrence puts it this way. It was always heading this way, wasn't it? According to the hard left, he means liberals, obviously. The censorship, the smears, the lies, the shaming, the cancellation, and now the violence. Actually, a fantastic quote I read amongst all was from Margarita Simonan, who is the editor-in-chief of RT. She says, to observe America is like watching a TV series where the writers have long run out of imagination and repeat themselves from episode to episode. But you're already accustomed to the characters, like to your own house slippers, so you keep watching.
That is brilliantly observed. I mean, I did think earlier today of Dallas. You're too young to know about Dallas, but there used to be a television series called Dallas.
I know of it.
JR,
I know.
Sue Ellen, and so on. Big hats, no cattle. It's like an episode of Dallas.
Yeah.
Except you can't, I think it was it Joe? I forget his name now. But after all that had happened, and this guy had been killed, this character had been killed, suddenly he appeared in the shower and it had all been a dream. All been a big, bad dream. Bobby Ewing, that's who it was. Inspiration in my ear. Thank you, director. What else is going?
Well, on a serious note, Kafil writes, George Galloway is the most powerful voice against the corrupt establishment in Israel. So it is no surprise that they have done everything they could to prevent him getting elected. If you look at the Gaza supporting independents, who won, kudos to them, but they will not be able to make the same impact as George Galloway would have done on his own. So the enemies channeled all their energies against George. And have they? Because this week, I remind you, you were again on the Ukrainian death list.
Yeah. Political violence, unacceptable. Except I'm now 7-time member of parliament. There it is on the screen. 7-time member of parliament, leader of a British political party, British citizen. And my government has not lifted a finger or a word about a Ukrainian parastatal organization with a track record of killing people on its death list, has put me on the death list. Mr. Speaker, sir, whatever happened to all your fears and anxieties about the safety of parliamentarians? Mr. Prime Minister, sir, this is a country that you are giving billions of our money to, that your ministers are forever visiting, that are firing weapons given by you that belong to us and now belong to them. And you can't keep your own veteran parliamentarians off their state death list? Seriously? I mean, I tried to keep that from you, as you know, because they don't frighten me. I'm not afraid of death. I've led a great life and I have left a lot behind me. What matters to me is not when I fall, but how many come forward to pick up my microphone, my pen, my mission when I fall. So don't think you will intimidate me. Neither you nor Zionism. I'm ready to meet my Maker. So don't think you will affect me in any way. And after me, my good wife, and my children, and my thousands of friends here and around the world. So you can stick your death list where the sun don't shine. Sorry, Gayatri, I didn't want to go off on that. Have you got anything else rattling, or shall I press on?
No. How can I follow on that? Apart from me pressing that.
Well, if I'm not here, you'll be here.
No.
After me, our children.
No. I don't want to go.
There's thousands of people like us. There's never been more people like us in the world.
Thank God that's true. I don't want to go further down that route, but I do want to denote the seriousness, because people have been reaching out to us in the light of things. That in the week that you were again on the death list, Trump has his assassination attempt. And that people have been reaching out for us for security. And don't forget, one of those on the list was a regular on our show.
Yeah.
And now no more, because Gonzalo Lira was murdered.
He was.
He was.
He was murdered. It's serious. I'm not making light of it. It's more serious that our own government, when I first appeared on that death list, I tried to reach James Cleverly, MP, who was then the Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
Who told me at a dinner with you sitting next to me.
I remember hearing the words.
In Park Lane at Jim Davidson's Care After Combat dinner, he said, "You are my parliamentary hero. You're my parliamentary role model. I want to be a parliamentarian like you." And he became the Foreign Secretary. And I tried to get through to him on the phone to say, "Listen, I'm on a death list put there by your mates." And he wouldn't take the call. And now we've got a new government. James Cleverly nearly lost his seat. He's certainly lost his ministerial possibilities. And you'll never, ever be like me as a parliamentarian, James. James Cleverly, you just ain't smart enough to be me. Anything else?
And MOATS says, "I'm amazed to see all that I have been saying about the UK and the JFK assassination have been validated by George." So I will just keep saying it.
Well, I've been saying it all of my life. I was 9 years old and I didn't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the killer. I mean, I don't believe now that he was the killer at all. I certainly, at 9 years old, I didn't believe he was the sole killer. As soon as he was shot dead in police custody, I thought, well, who killed the man that killed the man that killed the president, and why? And of course,
exactly the same happened.
I realized that Jack Rubenstein, who was a strip club owner who killed Lee Harvey Oswald, he already was diagnosed with terminal cancer, so he had nothing to lose. He did the job of eliminating the patsy, and his family were presumably looked after. It was mere trading, so far as he was concerned. Look, we could talk about this over chips after the show. Let me press on. David Johnson said, Trump said he wanted to go into Venezuela and take the oil. He was behind the Bolivia coup and he stopped arming the Azov in 2018. And Jack Klugman, great name, says, why is the UK blocking the ICC arrest warrant for Butcher Netanyahu so he can whisk into DC to address the Reichstag? Well, look, Jack, the Labour government of Keir Starmer is now the government responsible for blocking the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and Gallant. Go figure. Victor is in southeast London. He wants to change the topic to UK politics, and you are very welcome. Victor, what would you like to say?
Good evening, George. I wanted to report on a fake sham public meeting I tried to join that was organised by Esther Giles and Tony Greenstein on Friday evening, where you were represented ably, or to the best of his ability, by your deputy, Mr. Williamson. Not only was it obviously biased, Mr. Greenstein and Mr. Bass were almost invariably given the last word, but it appeared to show the audience all agreed with Mr. Greenstein's views that you're some kind of Nazi, you're some kind of dog whistle racist, etc., and we should all leave the Workers' Party and join Mr. Greenstein or follow Mr. Baish's advice, a colleague of Mr. Greenstein's there, and support Keir Stormtrooper. I wondered why it appeared so biased. So when I tried to put my view across, which was it's a bit rich from Mr. Greenstein, a man who happily cheered for Tony Blair when he shook hands with a leading member of Franco's last European fascist government, Aznar, and happily had Muslim kids bombed in Iraq and Afghanistan and got tortured, all apparently with Mr. Greenstein's support, despite his fake posure.
Well, would that, Victor? This is too, how shall I put it, narrow a subject to be of global interest. But I thank you for drawing it to my attention. I'll consult Mr. Williamson about it. But would that be the Mr. Greenstein that regularly messages me, asking to be on the mother of all talk shows to promote his latest book? Would it be that Mr. Greenstein? You stinking little hypocrite, Mr. Greenstein. Now Jeff is in Michigan on Trump. How has it all gone down in Michigan, Jeff?
Well, pretty much the same as it always goes down here. We don't have much power in Michigan, but those that see can see. And I'm just hoping, and I know how smart and bright you are in politics, but on most other things, I would like to mention one thing that you just brought up a few minutes ago with your lovely wife, the JFK assassination. Look up James E. Files, the grassy knoll shooter, who admitted he shot Kennedy in the head. It's on the internet. His name is James E. Files, and he was...
Is that Files, F-I-L-E-S?
Yes, just like the file that gets you out of prison. He was in prison at the time that he gave the interviews, and he tells you what weapon he used, which was the Remington Fireball Special, and the mercury round that he shot. I had not heard about a mercury round before I heard Mr. Files discuss it, and I was so amazed by his testimony or his statements, and I believed them absolutely. You know, I'm an attorney. I'm a trial attorney, so I know the rules of evidence. I've listened to lots of stories, and I believe Files absolutely. And I mentioned it to a fellow passenger on an airplane who told me he was an engineer about the mercury round. He said, that makes sense. I said, why does that make sense? Because it didn't ring any bells with me. And he said, because then there's a double impact. Now, if you watch the film of the shooting, the Zapruder film, you will have no doubt, as long as you have nobody whispering in your ear, that it was Lee Harvey Oswald. You will have no doubt where that shot came from. It came from the grassy knoll. And you may remember that the motorcycle cop... Yeah, right front. His head moved violently from the right front to the left rear. But regarding this, you can get it on the internet, and I would urge everybody to go look, because this would be my first example of why they should not listen to the government tell them and explain anything. And I am going to suggest that both these parties who are running for so-called president, both of them have blood on their hands. Therefore, I'm not particularly sympathetic regardless, because Trump took out the beloved General Soleimani, who helped us hugely with ISIS and was beloved by his people. Yep. That was a big loss, and to all of us, really. And so we still have to face that. But what I want to do is just... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's undoubtedly true. I don't know if the word crosses the Atlantic. Both of them are turds. And no turd can ever smell nice. I'm happier if the turd called Trump wins than the turd called Biden wins, only on the principle, to mix the metaphor, that a stopped clock is right twice a day, and there is at least the possibility, particularly on the Ukraine, that Trump will be righter than Biden. And that stops World War III. So that clinches it for me. But it doesn't stop me knowing that Trump and Biden are both turds. I hope the word crosses the Atlantic, but I'm talking about feces for those who don't grasp it. Jeff, always a great pleasure to hear from you and in Michigan. I'm coming to Dearborn with my good wife later in the year and giving a speech there. I hope that you will make yourself known and come to the meeting. I've run out of time, and I have to be more careful of time now that we're joined by KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. It's been marvelous for me, and I hope it was for you. And if it was, then you can join me in Rochdale on Monday, tomorrow night. You can join me on Have It Out with Galloway on Tuesday night, and you can join me, God willing, on the mother of all talk shows on Wednesday. This story will run and run. Good night.